see here. Let me see. Okay. There's a slight little, a few second delay sometimes, Danielle. So if you hear me just a few seconds late, don't, kind of wait and pause a little bit.
Got it.
So we have a few people in the room, so I want to go ahead and get started. My name is Bakari Shabanu, and I am the blogger for the National Journal Writing Project. And we're here, and I'm very excited to interview Danielle Lincoln Hanna. And she's the author of Journaling to Become a Better Writer, 7 Keys to More Authentic Fiction. So she has did a couple of blog posts for my blog, and I really appreciate that, Danielle. And
my pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. When I read those, I knew she had something going on. So it was great to finish reading her book last week. And so we're really in for a treat to have her on. If it's anyone that cannot hear me right now, let me know through the message box. There's a message box. There should be a chat box on the right side of your screen. You can kind of put your cursor over it if it doesn't pop out. Okay. And we're going to post a link to Danielle's book, and I have that link here somewhere, right here. Let me put that in there now before I forget. And at the toward the end, we're also going to send another link to a handout or kind of a PDF that she put together for our attendees. So we'll put that send that link out as well at the end. Okay. And let me close my mail application, so that's not a problem. And we'll get started in just a second. And by the way, for those who are listening, this is my, as you can kind of tell, this is my second webinar, so I'm still kind of figuring out how to do it, and so I appreciate your patience.
Like I said, we got me logged in on time, so I think we're ahead of the game. So.
Yep, that's right. So it happened. Okay. So let me switch over to Danielle. Well, I can switch over to me a little bit too first. Let me switch out of this, stop broadcasting here. Can everyone see me? I guess I should be on screen right now. So
there you are.
Right. And so we're going to switch back and forth, and then I'll switch it to Danielle as well. So Danielle, let me start out with just kind of giving us some background about yourself and where you're from.
Well, the literal answer to that is that I'm from North Dakota. It's probably about 25 degrees out right now and lots of snow.
Wow.
And I learned how to read and write when I was 4. And I started keeping a journal when I was 5. By the time I was about 7, I figured writing is what I wanted to do, and I was already writing fiction by then. I am now a published author, so that's pretty exciting.
Yay!
I don't know if your listeners are too familiar with indie publishing versus traditional publishing, but I decided there were far more opportunities with indie publishing or self-publishing. So Journaling to Become a Better Writer is a self-published book, and I'm very proud of it. So
Definitely. I have published a book as well, and both of us have, and it's just great. I think the self-publishing opens up a whole new opportunity for people to get published, and that's a lot more work, I think, though, when you do it by yourself. But it's just great to do it, and I don't really distinguish between the two. There's some really, your book could have easily been published by a publishing house, and
thank you.
It was wonderful to read. Definitely, it was wonderful to read, and I encourage people to read the book. Definitely download it. And I think it's about, how many pages is it, Danielle?
I want to say it's around 200. Like
200,
print edition is about 200.
Right, and it's definitely a page turner because you use part memoir and you use kind of part of your own life to talk about that. And you kind of want to see what's going to happen, things you're talking about. We want to kind of like, I want to skip ahead and find out what happens. And so that was great to do that. And then, but you weave in talking about, journal writing as well. And and as well as fiction writing. So it was just amazing how you weaved all of those three things together and kept it so it didn't confuse people. You know, you really kept it together, and I really enjoyed that part about the book. And so I really encourage people to definitely download it. And even if you're not a fiction writer, it's a great piece for just journal writers, period. So even if you just keep a journal and you're not really interested in fiction writing, that's okay as well. It's great for that. Because I know a lot of times I don't use enough, how can I say, characterization and dialogue and setting description in my own journal. So I think even those techniques are great, just journaling about yourself.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
So definitely. And so how, the one big question I know some people might have is, when you journal, are you keeping do you do paper notebook journal, or do you do a app, or how do you journal?
For most of my life, I have journaled by hand. I've got a lovely collection of matching leather-bound journals that have been all filled out. More recently, I've experimented a little bit more with just keeping a journal in a Word document on my laptop. And I'd say right now I'm in kind of a phase where I'm not quite sure which way I'd rather be doing it, because I feel like I think better when I'm writing by hand, but at the same time, I've got so much I want to journal about that in the real world, you know, I've got work to get done and I've got to eat and sleep.
Right,
and
right.
my entries can easily run 20 to 50 pages. So sometimes doing it by typing is the better way to go. But so I'm not quite sure where I sit between typing it or writing it right now. I'm kind of in a no man's zone.
Yeah, I can say that now that I've switched to digital of about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe longer. And I can't go back to writing with pen and paper. I don't even really write longhand that much anymore at all. And so it does, you know, it's like if you leave the handwriting, I think it's hard to go back. And so, but I do long for those days to have, like, you know, just think to kind of slow myself down a little bit and write by hand, but I just can't do it. So I'm waiting. Yeah. I'm just out of my hands now. So well, great.
I definitely still write my novels by hand. I've not had much success writing them on a laptop, just because I need to slow the process down. So I'm really thinking about what I'm writing. So in a strange and twisted way, I actually write faster by hand because I know I have an easier way of finding out where I'm going.
Oh, wow. Okay. Ooh, I know I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that at all. I do all my writing articles and things of that sort. I do them by typing as well as dictation as well. So I couldn't.
Oh, yeah.
I used to write by hand in college. I hated it. So I hated it, you know. Yep. Well, definitely. I understand, though. I can definitely understand whatever works for you. And definitely you are I don't want to just say a natural storyteller. I think it's more than that. You have studied this craft. So, I mean, even though you may have a talent for it, you have definitely studied it as well. And so I don't want to just say, oh, she's just a talented person, so of course it works for her. I don't want to say that.
When I was, like I said, I was about 7 years old when I was like, geez, you know what? I want to be a writer. And by the time I was in my teens, I was like, well, and at that time, self-publishing wasn't really a thing. It certainly wasn't a very well-known thing. So if you're going to get in the game, you had to be traditionally published. Right. And my goal was not just to be a writer on the side. My goal has always been to be a full-time author. And so I said, I mean, if you're going to not only succeed in getting published traditionally, but be in that tiny little top bracket where you're actually making your living on it, you've got to be the top of your game. And I realized that early on, and I was just putting all my effort into really learning this craft well. So fortunately, it was fun at the same time.
Right. And definitely you could you can tell in every page of your book, you know, that you really is really well crafted and the way that you weave that in. And I didn't learn to start writing until really actually probably late high school, or really college actually. So you're really fortunate to have that, to do that, because I know I had a lot to learn by the time I got to college. So definitely, I can see it. I can see that on every page. You really do have a craft. So let's talk about so why should novel writers keep a journal? What I know that's one of the reasons why I started keeping a journal myself was because I was an English major, and I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know what kind of writer I wanted to be, but I wanted to be a writer. I think I kind of started out with a journalism writer, but why should writers keep novel writers keep a journal?
Well, sometime in my teens, I heard somebody say that good writers keep journals, and at the time, I kind of didn't make the connection, but I was like, well, I'm journaling already anyway, so I'll just keep going. And it wasn't until recently that I kind of looked back over my journals, and somebody kind of pointed out to me, a very close friend I'd shared my journals with, pointed out to me that my journal was written very much like a story you would read. And I was kind of surprised by that, and I looked into it. And what I found out is that I was basically, everything I was learning about how to write a good novel, I was practicing subconsciously in my journal. So everything about dialogue, characterization, even plot, I was practicing it in my journal. So if you think about it, everybody tells an aspiring author, keep your eyes wide open, pay attention to the world around you, learn about life. Journaling is a way to get that all down on paper and just think about life a little bit more consciously. And it's also a great way to work from life models. An analogy that I draw on in the book is you think about like the artist in the park with the sketch pad, and she's drawing things that she sees all around her. And as novelists, we have access to that exact same technique of being able to draw from the things that are around us, but instead of the sketch pad and actually drawing, people and objects, we're drawing them with words. So your journal is just a really great place to observe what's really going on out there in the world and then capture it in words. And it's a great way then to just bring more authenticity to your fiction writing because you've already practiced putting words around real life. So I've found journaling to be just a huge benefit to being able to write fiction because you just bring so much of that, what you've seen in the real world, into your novel. So I definitely believe that was good advice. Good writers should keep journals.
So do you distinguish the journal is different from, say, a writer's notebook, or is that kind of the same thing for you?
You can split the two apart if you want to, or you can roll them all together. And I do a little bit of both. I've got a journal that I keep in my purse, and it comes with me everywhere I go. And then if I'm on a research trip, or if this is a little bit more rare, but if I just have some time to sit down and observe what's going on around me, I can just whip that out and just start writing down sights and sounds and smells and how would I describe this and what do I see going on. But at the same time, I also practice a lot of the same stuff in my regular journal. And sometimes I'll be in the middle of nowhere and all I have is my travel journal or whatever you want to call it. And I'll just start journaling in that one because I just need to sit down and journal right now wherever I happen to be. So sometimes there's overlap between the two. But I think as a writer, you should have some means of recording words no matter where you are. Whether or not that's an app on your phone or even something you can use to record your voice or whatever you're most comfortable with. I think you should always have a means of recording words and recording what you're seeing around you.
Right, and that's one of the advantages I see of using an app because my phone is with me all the time, and so even when I go travel, I can always just jot down some notes and then come back and fill them out later. And so, I think that's definitely correct. And also I encourage people to read. One of the things that you do in your book is that you use some of your actual journal entries. And you said in your book that you actually go back and rewrite some of your entries in your journal?
I do. And I want to make it clear that I don't go back and be like, I'm going to lie about what happened and write it better or something like that.
Right. Okay.
But one of the first things that you need to learn as an author is that the first time you write something is not going to be your best work. There's really like two different parts of your brain involved. The first part of your brain is involved in just trying to get the words out onto the paper, and that can be really hard. And then the second part is actually expressing what you meant. And that is a multi-step process. First you write it, you go back and you read it, and you're like, that doesn't quite hit at what I was trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's perfectly legit to go back into your journal, read over it again, and say, that's not quite what I was trying to say. That's not quite how I was feeling. What are better words to express this? So yes, I definitely do go back and edit my journal a little bit. Or sometimes I'll be, journaling mass events, and I'll be like, oh, I totally forgot about this one vignette that happened in here that I do want to keep. And so I'll go back and add that back in.
Right.
So in that regard, keeping a journal as a Word document is very helpful.
Right. And I was just going to say that's, I'm not trying to plug, digital apps here, people. So I just want to make that clear. But one of the things is that I do, that's the reason why I keep a digital journal as well, because I can go back and add things or even change some things because I it's not accurate the first time. And I really want to kind of be able to look back on my journals 5 or 10 years from now or whatever. And so it's great to be able to go add stuff. And I can also kind of filter. I don't know, do you kind of tag your entries, or is there any kind of way that you can easily get back to the entries that you wrote about so that you can find the entries pretty easy?
That's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's the one.
I'll do like a search, like if there's a particular entry I'm looking for and I know that I use particular words or names or months of the year, I knew it happened in July or something like that.
Right.
And then I'll just, search for this word or phrase, and usually I can find it in under a minute. So
well, I want to make a plug then, because I think the reason why I use Day One, I use a Day One journal app, and it allows you to tag your entries. So you can say, I might want to tag it, all the entries that I did using the NaJaWriMo month or what have you. So I can just filter those out and just read those. Or if I want to I tagged, when I wrote my book, I actually wrote more pages in my journal than I wrote the book itself. But just trying to figure out how I'm going to do the book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just like a whole bunch of journal pages about the book and just the process of that. But I mean, I tagged all of those iBook, and so I can just filter those out and go find them easily. Plus, I could do a search as well. But the tagging is just great. It's like having multiple journals within a journal. You can just kind of filter. Like if I went to New York City, I can just look up the tag New York City, and then I get all the entries for that.
That's really clever. I had never even thought of that or heard of that before. That's really neat.
Yeah. Day One has really good for that one. So let me ask you now, as a novel writer, does your journal help? Do you kind of write yourself into a novel idea, or how does that journal help that process in terms of recognizing that you have a story? I mean, does that kind of just happen in your head and then you write about it? Like, does it happen in the shower first? I know you talk about how you find things in the shower, and I do the same thing. I was so great when you said that. I was like, I'll start to write you right then. I come up with so many ideas in the shower. I mean, literally, I have written the first paragraph of an article in the shower. Yeah. So by the time I come to my computer, I'm ready to go. I get so many ideas. But do your ideas come to you in the process of journaling, or do you kind of get the idea and then go journal? How did that process work?
For me, the overlap between story idea creation and journaling is a little bit different. Okay, first of all, maybe I should clarify. There's my personal journal.
Okay.
There's my travel journal, which stays in my purse. And then every novel I write also gets its own journal. Gotcha.
All right. I see.
So I've got multiple journals going on. Mm-hmm. I'm not an addict or anything.
No. I get it. Yeah.
But I think for the specific, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. No, I was going to say that's the point of kind of like having the tag. Is like I think about it like that. If my tag is a personal journal, a work journal, and then another. So I have all these, but they're all in one place, but they're tagged out. So that's a good point. I can see why you would do that. I'm sorry.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, anyway, for the specific question you're asking, like how do I create a story through journaling? Mm-hmm. That usually happens in my story journal, where I will just write down the ideas that had come to me. Usually ideas come to me somewhere out of the real world. Mm-hmm. I'll see something that just really caught my interest, and I'll be like, my gosh, I want to write a story about that. And then when I recognize that I've got a new story that I want to work on, I'll start a journal for it. That's kind of an official date. It's like this big anniversary, the day that we got started the story journal.
Right.
And then I'll just write down the ideas that I have so far. As the characters start to speak to me, I'll write down what I'm learning about them. When I hit roadblocks and problems that I can't figure out, then I'll spend a lot of time in my journal, and I'll be like, let's say we could do A, we could B, C. I think we should probably do B, stuff like that. So for the process of journaling to create the story, that happens definitely in my story journal more so than in my personal journal.
Okay. And when you say, because I've heard writers say this, particularly fiction writers say this, that your characters speak to you. Talk about that. I mean, how does that, that feels kind of like, whoa, that feels kind of weird. I think I've written a couple of fiction stories in college, but I've never really done that. But I've heard, writers say that. How does that work?
Well, let me tell you, I've had characters talking to me since I was 4 years old, and it's still weird. So
wow.
Don't worry, it's weird. And frankly, there are times when I wish they would shut up. But no, I had a particularly nasty character that was just like literally stalking me, and I finally turned around and said, "Just go, just leave. I don't want to talk to you anymore."
Right.
But for me, my story writing process completely and totally revolves around getting to know my characters. And I never tell a character who they are or what they're like or what their story is.
Okay.
Just like I would never, like, hi Bakari, this is who you are and what you're like, and this is your life story, and he would be sitting there saying, what? What is she about my life?
Right.
So I treat my characters the exact same way. I treat them like real people. I let them tell me. Now, practically speaking, how does that work? Because, okay, let's be honest, they're not real. Sigh.
Right. Even though some people talk about characters as if they're real. I've seen that.
And I definitely do. And if we keep going on this topic, you will hear me talking about them as if they are real.
Well, you should. And you probably should, because you're like you talked about in your book, you as the writer has to bring those characters to life, and you just can't say, this character's a mean person. I mean, you really have to show it. You have to make the reader feel that and believe that. Yeah. And it's not just enough to tell them, like the old adage, show, don't tell. And so, you have to kind of, I would imagine you have to live with your characters. You have to live with them like real people. Yes.
I've got a small 1-bedroom apartment, and trust me, it's overflowing. So in a more practical sense, how do I treat these characters as real people, and how do they tell me their story? I feel as if every character I meet exists fully formed and kind of lives somewhere in the back of my head. So in another way to describe this would be like, I think subconsciously, I already know the story I'm trying to tell and the people that are in it. And then it's just trying to connect the subconscious part of my mind with the conscious part of my mind so I can write about it.
Okay. All right.
Every character I meet, once I get to know them better, I usually find out that there is one part of them that is totally me. It's like some slice out of me, my personality, that's maybe focused a little bit more or explored a little bit deeper, or it's their dominant trait, whereas in me it's maybe more of a less dominant trait. I also usually find that they also come from 5, 6 other people, and it just all got blended together into a single character.
Okay.
So this is how they start out somewhere in my subconscious, where my subconscious mind is just trying to figure life out and figure people out. And then it just comes up with this character, and here's an opportunity to really get to know this character really well and just kind of explore what's going on, So in that sense, you could say they are real people. Every character is up to 5 or 6 real people that just all got merged into one character.
Right. So do you use your journal to kind of also kind of, I would say, write from the point of view of your character, or to kind of write about the character? Like in other words, you have this novel line going, and so that's kind of like, where that's kind of going on. You're plotting that out. But do you kind of go back to your journal sometimes just to kind of process those characters sometimes, or?
Usually for characters that are really important to me and ones that um, are having kind of a more of an impact on my personal life,
Hmm.
you'll find their names all over my personal journal. They'll step
Okay.
out of the story journal and they'll come into my personal journal, and we'll start. These are the characters who maybe represent a part of my life that I haven't quite figured out really well yet,
Hmm.
or maybe they have figured something out well and they're helping me figure life out. Some of my characters are like mentors to me, which sounds really messed up, but
Hmm.
you
Well,
could say that it's kind of the adult part of your mind talking to your inner child or something like that. And
okay.
sometimes for
Okay.
me it's more in the form of a character who
Hmm.
seems to have life figured out, so hey, let's get together, go for a walk, whatever.
Hmm.
Figure life out, because I don't get it, maybe you do.
Hmm. Right. 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 Okay, okay, I can get that. I can see that. I can see. So, like, how you another thing you talked about in your book is the writer needs to have good observation skills. You
Mhm.
know, and you talked about like going to the mall and just do people watching. And I think I've done that a couple of times, not recently, but I think I've done that. Just kind of relaxing, and I didn't intentionally go do it, but I was just kind of sitting there. I'm like, just checking people out. How do you use your journal for that in terms of building observation skills, because you do get very detailed in your descriptions, even, in your book. I mean, it's very good detail. And that's the kind of thing I should do more of in my own journal, even though I'm not fiction writing. I still should do more detail about the people I interact with and things of that sort.
Well, the easiest way to get started is, again, to have a journal or an app or whatever with you so that you can be recording your words in real time while you have your subject in front of you that you're trying to study. Because this is all about learning how to build up your observation skills so that you're aware of the world around you. And eventually you should get to this point where you can't go out in public without just staring at everything, which I've been accused of.
Right. I remember your mother said that in the book. You know.
Yes, and she'll be like, "Are you people watching?" I'm like, "Yeah," and then she'll people watch with me. So
Oh,
and we'll both be there people watching. We're
right.
staring at people, making
Right.
comments.
Right. Right.
So the easiest way is to bring a journal or something with you. Go out someplace public where you'll see a lot of other people or a lot of other objects, where your senses are just going to be filled with all kinds of different things.
Mm-hmm.
And then just start writing down, go through your five senses. What do I
Mm-hmm.
see? What do I hear? What do I smell? What do I feel? And where it applies, what do I taste?
Mm-hmm.
And then just go down and write down everything you can think of. And this will just start to really enhance your observation skills. You could apply this to your entire setting. So if you're sitting in the mall, that you'll probably fill quite a few pages if you're applying it to an entire mall.
Mm-hmm. Right. True. True.
Or
True.
you can zero in a little bit more and say, I'm just going to describe the chair I'm sitting in, or I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
describe that person sitting over there with a coffee because he looks really interesting or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Do be a little tactful about your staring.
Right. Right. Just don't like
Don't creep people out.
yeah. Like right. Like you're stalking someone.
Yeah.
So do you kind of would you recommend to for people starting out to kind of like keep a cluster of words and phrases or descriptions, and then kind of do kind of a paragraph type writing later on, or try to do
Yeah,
the paragraph? Yeah.
definitely, because there's the one process of taking all of this stimulation in, and trust me, the first time you try this, there's going to be like so much, you're going to be like, how do I even bring any organization to this?
Right. Right.
So what you want to, if you're comfortable writing right there in the mall or whatever location you chose, then go ahead and just start writing.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I need to have kind of a quiet place that I'm really familiar with, that I can just kind of zone out and focus on just the words. So like for me, I would take that journal page that I filled out and I'd go home with it. And then I would sit down and try to write a description based on these items that I noticed.
Mm-hmm.
But then to bring even more organization to that, because this can end up being really scattered and helter-skelter. Like I said, you're just going to be bombarded with all this stimuli.
Right.
And when you're writing a really good description in fiction, or if you're trying to describe your real world for practice, you need to bring a little bit of focus to this. So it's like you don't describe every last little detail, because then you're just going to kind of overwhelm whoever is reading this. Your job is to bring more focus to it. So what I recommend doing is choose a theme for that setting and say, usually the way I do it is like, how did I feel about this place? For a mall, I'd probably say, especially during the Christmas season, massively hectic.
Right.
And then I would go down that list of stimuli that I'd written down and say, which ones of these, of everything that I picked up here, really carries that message of massively hectic? And then write your description and only include those items from your list that supports that theme of massively hectic. So that's how you can practice. Not only, you should observe practically everything, but you only need to write about those things that actually bring a mood to the words that you're writing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and some of it can be like an exercise, so you're just kind of just doing those skills, observation skills. And then other times it might be because it's a project you're really working on. It's a novel in a process. And so you might be bringing that into it. So yeah, I can definitely see that. And so does sometimes, and I know this happens to me a lot of times in my journal, Danielle, is I don't really kind of know what I'm trying to figure out, but when I start writing, I start figuring things out by writing itself. Yep. So, that's the best time with journaling is that when you finish, you're like, you pretty much either solved the problem or you've gotten a better understanding of something. Does that happen to you for your fiction writing as well? Do you kind of work yourself through some things?
Yeah, there are times when I'm sitting down to write a scene out of a novel and I'll be like, literally, I have no idea what happens in this scene. I just know that I need to put in my word quota for today. Okay. And I'll be writing along, and by the end of the scene, it's just somehow ended up where it needed to be. If I'm lucky. Other times it'll be like, this totally went nowhere, but that's okay. That's first draft. So.
Okay. So how do you feel weary about deleting stuff that maybe like you said, you did that word count, or you spent like an hour writing it? That scares me to just delete things. But do you do that often? Do you have to because it's just not working?
Not very often.
Okay.
Every now and again I'll start a scene and I'll be like, no, this is totally going the wrong way. And like I said, I write it by hand when I'm noveling, so then I'll get half a page or a page, and then I'll be like, no, this is wrong. And then I'll just put that page aside, start fresh, and usually the second time I'll end up going where I was supposed to go.
Okay.
And, while I'm trying the second version, I'll still have that first version sitting there. And if the second version turned out right, then I can go ahead and put the first version in recycle. Right.
That's what I love about also typing as well. I can just kind of copy it and paste it somewhere and say, it's still there.
Yeah, it's still there.
I don't have to let it go completely, but I know that I'm not going the right way. Yeah, right. Good point.
And I always keep my old drafts. I'll write first draft, and then that will be one document. And then I'll start second draft. That'll be a brand new document. So, and I just always keep the old documents, and that way if something drastic happens, if my computer has some weird hiccup and destroys my entire manuscript, I should still have the old version so I don't have to start over from scratch at least. Right,
exactly. I want to take a second to say to the listeners, if you have a question, for Danielle, please put it in the chat, and I would definitely, I think she can see it, but if she can't, I'll read it off. And so if you have questions, definitely post them there. I appreciate it. Yeah. So tell us a little bit now what novel have you written, published? Have you published? You published a novel, right?
Well, here's the crazy part about it. I have not published a novel yet. Now, I've certainly written novels, and I've written plays as well. I haven't actually published any of my novels yet, so it seems kind of weird to put out a book about how to write novels.
No,
my first book.
No, you believe me. You know about what you're saying. So
thank you. That was kind of a funny mistake actually, because I had written a series of blog posts on the topic, which continued to be fairly popular, and I was like, oh well, clearly I should be writing a book about this then. So
right.
So the novels will be catching up very, very shortly. In 2016, I'll be putting out my first 3 novels. It's all in a series.
Okay.
They are, speaking of observing the world around you and using the real world to inspire what you're writing, I had become aware of the Lake Geneva, Wisconsin mail boat. It is a boat that delivers the mail peer-to-peer by means of a young high school or college student leaping off the side of the boat, running to the mailbox on the pier,
Wow.
running back to the boat. And the boat is so big they can't actually stop at every pier, so the boat just keeps going. So they got to run back. And, yeah, I could probably show up a link to a video that shows that. It's really cool. I bumped into that a few years ago, and I was like, I've totally got to write a story about that.
Now, they don't do that every day, right? I mean, they do it like
every day during the summer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty epic.
I remember reading that part in the book, but I didn't remember that particular detail.
I might not have.
Yeah,
you probably didn't mention that.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you saying it, but I remember that was kind of the book you were written on. Okay. So you're in a process of like writing these 3 books, and you kind of want to have them kind of like all pretty much done before you release the first one, or you're going to just release the first one and then work on the next 2?
They're going to end up being released kind of fairly swiftly in a row. I'll probably put at least a month in between releases that people have a chance to read the first one before they go on to the second.
Yeah.
But that was another miscalculation on my part because I assumed it was just 1 book. And I started writing it, and by the time I was about a third of the way done telling the story, I looked at my word count and realized I already had the equivalent of a full-length novel.
Right, true.
So it turned out being a lot longer than I anticipated, and I was like, okay, but I wasn't quite sure where I was supposed to split it. So I said, well, I'll just write the whole series at once and then go back and find out where kind of the natural breaks are.
Right.
So that's where I'm at right now. So it'll be nice being able to release them quickly, though. That'll be the
I was listening to a webinar with one writer. She publishes a lot of books on Amazon, and she talked about something about releasing either chapters or segments of your book to readers and letting them read that, and then at the end they get the entire book, or something like that. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. But she did say that series novels kind of sell better and work better on Amazon.
Yeah, if you're kind of a natural series writer, you've really got something good going for you. Some people just can't think in terms of series. Fortunately, I almost always think in terms of series. And so, what happens is when you write your first book in the series, people get attached to your characters, and they're like, they kind of don't want this relationship with the characters to end. So then if you have a second and third book or even more, people are like, oh, good, I get to spend more time with these people that I enjoy spending time with. So
exactly. Yeah. Well, that makes sense because, you kind of like, you really don't want it to end. So it's like, if you can if you have another book out, then that makes sense.
If you ever had that experience where like you're putting off reading a book you really love because you just don't want it to end.
Right. That's true. Yeah, I've seen that. It's funny. I need to get back. I was a literature major actually, and for some reason, a few years ago, about 10 years ago, I just kind of stopped reading fiction. Period. I don't know why. I'm finally getting back into it. A friend of mine sent me her book, and she's really a good writer as well. And so it's kind of getting me back into fiction writing because I used to read fiction all the time. But I think the reason why I stopped is because I just have, since the internet, I have less time to read books like I used to. I just, when I was coming up in college, I used to read all the time. Yeah. And now I have to really fight to get reading time in. So.
Yeah, I find that it's something I've got to kind of schedule and then say, you know what, this is important. This is my industry. I should probably be aware of what's going on in it.
Right, exactly. So
yeah. Now,
you see, Melissa has a question. She says, "Is your story journal anything like a series Bible?" I'm not sure.
Melissa, could you describe series Bible? I'm not familiar with that term.
Yeah, maybe kind of clarify that for us, and we can follow up with that. Kind of typing in.
Okay. I'm guessing she might be referring to like this documentation that some authors keep, just to keep track of all the various moving parts and all the characters and all the plots. We'll see if she enlightens us more, but I think that might be what she's referring to.
Okay. Do you kind of,
Yeah.
oh, she said yes. Okay.
Yay! I got it right. Did I get a star?
Thank you for your question.
Yeah. Is it like a series Bible? I guess it is, but probably not as organized.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for me to be able to go back and find where I talked about X, Y, or Z, I just have to use the search function. Or there are times when, like just recently, I reread my entire journal for the series I'm working on now, because I was looking for new plot ideas, and so I was kind of picking up ones that got cast to the wayside, and I was like, well, maybe I should still keep that or whatever, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, she says, that is it, keeping track of details for longer stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, I do kind of use it that way, but it's just harder to find the information you're looking for. So I think if that's kind of what your goal is, you'd probably be better off finding a better organizational system where, like, here you have a folder where you keep files on your various characters, and each character gets their own file with all of their information, and here's a folder where you keep summaries of your plots, stuff like that. For me, my story journal is more where I figure problems out. You know, if I got stuck on a plot point somewhere, just like I use my personal journal to figure my life out and kind of explore my options, I'll use my story journal to figure my characters' lives out and explore their options.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they're related, but I wouldn't call them identical.
Okay. Do you know about an application called Scrivener?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a pretty good. I also recommend that to people as well, because that's one. It's kind of like you set up your writing space as kind of a project, and you can keep all your related research and notes, and you can break it down into chapters, and you can skip around the chapters, so you don't have to, like, you know, have it one little long linear kind of document, but you can break it up. And so I started writing my book using Scrivener, even though I didn't write a novel, but to write my book there, and then I drafted it there, and then I took it to Word, and from there, from Word to iBook. But yeah, so that's, you know, I was just letting people know Scrivener is a good way to do that. I mean, it's a little bit difficult to learn. You have a learning curve to it, but it's a great way to organize all your thoughts. Do you kind of create kind of a character tree or anything for your characters? I mean, in terms of a family tree or something? I mean, how do you, or you just kind of like make it more organic? You know, you kind of let it unfold organically.
Well, my dirty confession is that I'm pretty good at keeping most of the information in my head.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And for the stuff that doesn't stick in there, there's my story journal, which takes me a second to find what I'm looking for, but it will be in there.
Okay. Right.
So I usually, like, I will have a dossier to kind of help me explore the character a little bit more. It's full of, it's like a 30-page questionnaire, basically.
Okay.
So it's a really super long questionnaire, and sometimes I'll go through and use that for a new character and figure out a bunch of details.
Okay.
I don't.
So you have an actual interview. You have an actual interview with your character.
It's not really an interview. It's more like they got arrested and I'm tracking all their information.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. That makes sense.
But it's broken down into various headings. Like the very first section is just, what is the very first thing or things you notice about this character? Mm-hmm. Like the character just walked into the room. What are the very first things that hit you about this character? And then after that, I break things down a little bit more. There's a section on what do they look like. Mm-hmm. There's a section on what do they speak like. Do they have an accent? Do they have a certain catchphrase they use all the time? What does their speak like? Are they very well spoken? Are they very rough spoken? Stuff like that. Mm-hmm. There's another section on family. You know, what was their childhood family? Do they have a family now? There's another section on what is their spirituality. So it's a really long dossier, and it covers everything I could possibly think of. And most of the time I don't manage to answer all the questions, especially if it's a character I'm just getting to know. Right. Sometimes the question's like, yeah, actually that answer doesn't matter. Right. And other times it's like, I don't know yet, so I just skip it. But
I can see how it can be useful just for consistency and making sure that you're in tune with this character. So But the organic kind of way, just in your head, I think that is better. Because I don't know. I mean, I guess if you had like a big, thick novel, I don't know, thousands of pages or something, and you have complicated characters, you got like a Toy Story or something, novel where you have all these characters and things. You may have to keep a tree or something to keep track of everyone.
Go
ahead.
I think the sad thing is I do consider my characters to be so real.
Mm-hmm.
That it's like, well, I don't have files to keep track of who my friends are and what's going on in their lives.
Right.
And it's kind of the same deal with my characters. I'm probably closer friends with them than I am with most real people I know, sadly.
Right.
So I kind of know the details of their life.
Well, that's important because that makes your characters more real. Because if you don't want to treat them like stick figures or some exercise that you're doing, that you really have an intimate relationship with these characters.
Yeah, otherwise it'll show in the manuscript.
It'll show up, right. Now, toward the end of your book, you did something really, really interesting. You talked about like how the journal can give the writer purpose, and I thought that was just really. And I wasn't expecting that because you were talking about fiction writing and everything, and I'm like, oh, this is pretty interesting. So tell us a little bit more about that in terms of how did that getting purpose connect with fiction writing and journaling and all that?
Yeah, well, if you've been studying fiction writing, you'll probably have heard somebody say that a really good book needs to have a theme.
Okay.
Something that kind of transcends the story, kind of this takeaway value that you can leave your reader with and give them something to think about, and something that should hopefully add value to their lives.
Right.
And that's usually a really hard thing for most people to do. They're like, how do you even choose a theme? How do you do that? And the answer, I think, is what is important to you? What is really meaningful to you? Because that'll probably be kind of coming out in your story anyway. And if you can make yourself conscious of that, then you can do a better job of bringing that theme out in your story. And a great way to figure out what the themes are in your life is to just take a look at your journal and say, what am I constantly writing about?
Right.
What are the things that are really important to me? If you just sit down with a cup of coffee and a cozy chair and read over your journal going back as far as it goes, you should be able to pick out, here are the things that really mean something to me. And then if you go over and look at your fiction and take a good look at them, I'll bet you'll find those same themes in your fiction as well. So, and then you just, like I said, you can bring a little bit more focus to that and make it a little bit more impactful in your fiction writing.
I know that I have a box of notebook journals in my closet. You probably can see my closet back here in the back, but I have a hard time going back and reading those. I don't mind reading the ones that I've written the last, since my mom died about 5 years ago. I don't mind reading those per se and go back and reading those. But the ones in the closet, oh no, I just don't want. Those ones I kept in college and and all that when I was growing up. But do you go back and reread your personal journal as well to kind of see what emerges out of that, or do you read a personal journal alone?
No, I was referring to my personal journal.
Okay. I didn't know if you were talking about your story journal. That's okay. No, I may have missed it. So you do go back and reread your personal journal.
And mine goes back to when I was 5 years old, so that's a very long journal. And some of those beginning entries don't make any sense at all.
Well, no, I know that's. But we both have written about on the Najaramo blog about being honest in your journaling, because one of the things that's so important. I think the most biggest benefit of journaling is writing for yourself first, really being honest with yourself, and it's hard to do that. It's hard for us to be honest with ourselves. I know it took me a long time to kind of do that. And first off, I always kind of feel like, oh, if somebody reads this, and I don't want people to read it. But as a side note, are you going to leave your journal behind for people to read, like family members or whatever, or would you rather just have them kind of destroyed after you die?
The way I feel about it, it's like when I'm gone, I probably won't care anymore. So
that's true. Yeah.
I think I'd really like for people to read it after I'm gone. I would almost say I'd like somebody to kind of proofread it and publish it, but like I said, it goes back to when I was 5, so that would be
right.
multi-volume.
Right, that's true. No,
you'd have to be some kind of crazy to want to read the whole series.
Right. Well, there was what's her name? Anais Nin, I think her name. I can't pronounce her name. Who has? Remember, she has like Oh yeah, she has these Anais Nin. I'm not saying her name right, but she has about 12 or 13 volumes published, and she
Oh,
was
wow.
really well known. I believe she was a dancer. I haven't her novels are really detailed. I mean not novels, but her journals are seriously detailed, and
Huh.
she talks about her life with these different artists and actors and things of that sort. And I
Cool.
couldn't quite get through all of them, but I have read numerous personal journals, which I really like, and I get inspired to write in my journal even more. Like when I just read your book, as well as when I read,
Aw.
yeah, definitely, and when I read the journals of other published writers, I get inspired to write even more. And so, but I'm not sure I want to leave my journals behind. I think I might export many of the entries out and leave them for my children to read or what have you, my wife. But I don't really want to read the entire thing. It's not so that it was just terribly bad, but I want to be able to say that when I go to my journal, I'm not thinking about somebody reading it. I want to be able to really say what's on my mind, particularly on those days when it's just really rough, those experiences that are really rough. I want to be able to put that in my journal without having to feel like that it might hurt someone or somebody might feel they might misunderstand what I was
Yeah.
going through or saying. But
Yeah,
I can definitely see.
that's really interesting because for me, it's just the opposite, and it always has been. I have always written my journal with the concept that somebody was reading it. And I think the
Mhm.
difference is if you read my book, you'll understand that I came from a family where my opinion really didn't matter all that much. I did not in
Mhm.
any way, shape, or form feel like I was being heard,
Mhm.
which was one of the reasons why I was keeping a journal, because my journal was listening to me. And
Mhm.
while I was writing it, I always envisioned that some future person in some future generation was reading it. And I think this is the important point, was caring about what I was saying and was
Mhm.
understanding what I was trying to say.
Mhm.
So I think maybe that's kind of where you and me kind of feel a little bit different about it, because you're worried about somebody reading it and not
Mhm.
understanding, whereas I always look forward to somebody reading it and understanding.
Right. Right.
I think
Right.
maybe that's what the difference might be.
Well, yeah, and there's parts of my journal that I would love my kids to be able to have. I know when my father died, I was just going to college, and I felt like I didn't get to really know him, because you know how when you get
Mm,
to 18, 19, and 20, you really kind of become a different person, and you see your
mhm.
parents differently, and so I
Yeah.
would love to know more about him, and so I kind of want to leave parts of my journal behind, just for my kids to know something about things they may not know.
Mm. Yeah,
So
this would be an interesting question to ask our listeners if they wanted to
yeah,
post in, because I'd be really
right.
curious, how do you feel about leaving your journal behind? Would you want other people to read it or no?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, I see Melissa there. If you have anything you want to put on that, and we have about a few minutes left. So Melissa, if you have any other questions, or tell us about how you keep a journal, that'd be great as well.
Yeah.
Do that for sure. And I think we're when we were kind of doing some testing on this webinar, how long did it take for you to write your book?
I want to say it
To,
took a better part of a year.
mm-hmm,
Um, and it was definitely an extremely emotional process for me because, like you say, I have actual excerpts from my journal in
mm-hmm,
that book, and they rehash the most difficult time of my life, which was not that long ago. I mean,
right,
my life had just barely reached more stable footing, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to write this book.
right.
So going over that again and getting it ready for publication, there were days when I just couldn't do anything but lie down and cry.
Right.
So it
Yeah,
was,
you do. You really do take a risk and reveal a lot about yourself. And I was like, that makes it more interesting. But I know that was a risk for you, and I know that must have been really hard, because I know, just going, like I said, going back, even the few times I've read back in my old journals back in college or whatever, it's just hard to read those, because
yeah.
I was just struggling with girlfriends and struggling with just growing up as a man and doing all the kind of these things you go through. And some parts are painful to read, and so it's great that it's great that you're able to get through that, and do
I
that.
think
Yeah.
the important thing, if you're going to go back and read your journal,
Mm-hmm.
there are parts of your life that you're always going to be disappointed about. And you're
Right.
always going to ask yourself, why did it have to be this way? And was there anything I could have done to make it different, make it better?
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, I've got tons and tons of those questions.
Yeah.
And the thing I've kind of recently started to figure out is that, you know what? The point is, I can't go back and change it.
That's right.
but I can decide where to move on from here.
Mhm.
And I can accept the fact that these events made me who I am. And I can embrace my life such as it was and say, you know what? This is my story. It's mine. Just like, all kinds of nasty things have happened to my characters. And it's their story and it's theirs.
Mhm.
And they have no option but to just embrace it and then to tell their story. So that's the way I feel about it. This is my story. I'm going to tell it. Since I can't change it, I'm just going to embrace it and tell it.
Good point.
And
Very
that
good point.
helps a little bit when going back and reading your journal.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. And journaling is just a tremendous tool for keeping in touch with yourself, to
Yeah.
talking to yourself, to making sense of yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the reason why I started the project. I think that almost everyone can benefit from journaling. And I see, Melissa, you talked about how you kind of stepped away from journaling. You started journaling when you were young, and then you kind of stepped away from it, and now you're kind of coming back to it. And I did the same thing. I definitely came back to it after my mom passed away. And by that time, I was keeping a journal online. I was using the online journaling app or what have you. And so that was such a tremendous impact on me when my mom passed that I knew that I had to go back in the journaling, and so I went back and I've been keeping it again ever since. So definitely. Danielle, do you have any other things you want to add, or about what is your website? I think you have a website for writers, right?
Yes, I will type that one in the comments. It's called Indie Plot Twist. I run that with another writer named Carrie Lynn Lewis, and we're kind of geared towards other indie publishers, but we try to keep it varied enough that even if you're interested in traditional publishing, you should find plenty of stuff there. Mm-hmm. So there's the link. I hope I typed that right. I did. indieplotTwist.com.
Okay, great.
So you can find lots and lots of writing advice and what Carrie and me are learning as we pursue indie publishing. We'll come back and we'll report, well, this worked well, that didn't work well. So and that's a pretty happy group there of people who comment in the blogs and follow us on Twitter. We're on Twitter as well. It's just at Indie Plot Twist.
Okay. So it's like a community.
Yeah, we try to keep it pretty laid back and just want people to feel really welcome, and just, we always say our theme there is coffee, even though dirty confession, neither one of us drink coffee very much, but we just want that atmosphere of pull up a chair and grab a mug and let's just talk shop, so that's Indie Plot Twist.
And I was going to make one more point that Melissa writes, I wrote to my future self so I could remember and maybe grow. And that's a really good exercise. I've done the same thing. I have one that I wrote that it was some kind of online tool that you could use. You can write a letter to yourself and you read it, they send it back to you like 10 years or 20 or 30 years or something like that.
That's
so
awesome.
That's going to be great. Yeah. I can't even remember what I wrote in it now.
Right.
But hopefully it will come back to me one day and I can be able to check it out.
That's kind of what I like about that new feature on Facebook, where they show you your memories from last year and 2 years ago and 3 years ago and all that.
Oh, okay.
Because you always post your most important events on Facebook, right?
Mm-hmm,
I mean, a lot
right.
of people do.
Right.
And for me, it was this season of the year that some of the most catastrophic events started happening in my life, and there were things that I posted to Facebook at that time. And to see them coming back up in my feed, I was like, "Aw,"
Right.
It was kind of nice being able to see that again and remember this was the anniversary, this was the day that happened, So that was pretty cool.
I'm going to post up there's a link to tell us about the PDF document too. This is the link to the PDF document you can download. If you hit the link, it should open up in your web browser. And I'll also put that into the email to the attendees to this one here too, because we have some other people in the attending, but they haven't said anything in the chat room. But
most people like to lurk anyway, so that's fine.
Yeah.
The PDF is basically just a list of journaling / writing prompts. So all of them have an eye towards this is something you can use to brush up your creative writing skills, but they're all something that you can practice in your journal. So it's a journal prompt for you, but it'll help you kind of focus on turning your journal into a ground where you can practice your creative writing skills. So I think there's like 7 different exercises in there. You can give them all a try. Hopefully they're fun.
Great, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much for being a part of this webinar. We did it. So it's great that we got it done. I'm learning each time I do it. I'm learning something more each time I'm doing it. So I'll get it down. And so we got the link to work and everything. And so really appreciate it. And I really appreciate your blog posts. They always get good links and people reading them and sharing them on Twitter. And I think next year I'll try to come on to Facebook, but I just can't manage it all. So I'm just trying to do a little bit at a time. I can barely do Twitter. So, so I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate people who attended. And Melissa, thank you for your questions and your feedback. Really appreciate that. And we're going to, NaJoWriMo, the National Journal Writing Month project is going to start up again in January the 1st. And we will be emailing prompts out every day during that month, so that if you want to do the 30-day challenge, you can use the prompts, or you can just take a challenge to write in your journal every day for 30 days. And so that'll start on the 1st. And I'll encourage you to go to our blogs, and I encourage you also to download and check out Danielle's book. It's really a great book to read, whether you are a fiction writer or not. You really will be engaged. Really will be engaged. Appreciate it. Anything else, Danielle? Yeah.
I think I'm done.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And we'll have this up for replay if I can figure out how to do that.
You can do it. You can do it.
You can do it. I can do this. I can do it.
You can.
Have it up for replay, and we'll have that there. So thank you so much, and everyone have a nice rest of the day and week.
Thanks for coming.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.